Gastroparesis is a diagnosis given to people who suffer from heartburn, nausea, vomiting, or the feeling of being full sooner than you should after eating. It is often treated with medications and sometimes surgery, and it's looked at as just a problem with slow or inefficient stomach emptying. But it may be an issue of a greater origin than just the stomach. And that's what I want to cover today, because your gastroparesis diagnosis may be leading to larger issues such as SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, food reactions, and many other things. I'm Dr. John Bartemus, and I'm putting the pieces together to help you live a life at optimal. Gastroparesis is a stomach focus only in conventional medicine because it's a lack or inefficient stomach emptying and leads to things such as nausea, vomiting, heartburn, constipation. But what we want to do from a functional medicine point of view is look at it as a holistic issue and look at broader physiology and see if the gastroparesis may be an effect of something else or some things else. Now, what we want to understand is that we have a function in our GI tract called the migrating motor complex, or the MMC for short. And so gastroparesis may be dysfunction of the MMC. So poor MMC function, poor migrating motor complex. What is the migrating motor complex? The migrating motor complex is a periodic wave that starts in the stomach and moves down through the small intestine, through the entirety of the GI to push things down. And this occurs in a fasting state. And the reason for this is to, yes, help move foods through, but also it's to keep bacteria down in the colon and not allow them to travel retrograde or reflux up into the small intestine. If they enter the small intestine, that can result in SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where the bacteria hang out up there and ferment your foods and lead to gas and bloating and ultimately diarrhea or constipation or alternation between the two. So the migrating motor complex is very important, and it should start in the stomach. So gastroparesis may be an issue of inefficiency in the migrating motor complex, and then there are many things that can contribute to that inefficiency and therefore maybe contribute to the gastroparesis that aren't being addressed conventionally. And then there's many conditions that can evolve from the gastroparesis. And that's what I want to dive into today. So what may be the results, some symptoms or conditions that result from gastroparesis or a poor migrating motor complex? Let's talk about them. One, obviously, is stomach pain. So stomach pain, bloating, gas, nausea, heartburn, all of that could be a result of gastroparesis. And if we have decreased migrating motor complex, decreased downward flow, we'll probably have slowing of intestinal transit and therefore result in constipation. And constipation means you're leaving toxins and undigested foods and inflammation and whatever else is in there that shouldn't be in there or should be moving through more efficiently. You're leaving that stuff in there longer. So that can lead to further symptoms, and this all may become IBS. And if we have IBS with constipation, that'd be IBS-C. Poor migrating motor complex may result in dysbiosis, which is a fancy term for imbalance between your probiotics and your commensal bacteria or your pathogenic bacteria. And dysbiosis may, as we said, result in SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where those bacteria in the colon are refluxing or traveling up into the small intestine where they shouldn't be, but because we're lacking the MMC, they're making it there because they're no longer being pushed downward by that motor complex. And dysbiosis and bad bugs, or an imbalance between good and bad bugs, may result in GI inflammation, and GI inflammation and a combination of dysbiosis may result in food reactions or a loss of our oral tolerance. So now all of a sudden, foods you didn't used to respond to, you now are reacting to. Like, hey, I never had a problem with strawberries, and now whenever I eat strawberries, I get hives or XYZ symptoms. So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are possible things that could occur because of the gastroparesis, which may be due to the decreased migrating motor complex. So what drives the gastroparesis? What are the factors that may impact the migrating motor complex and its efficiency? Good question. Glad you asked. So you're going to see some commonalities here, and you're going to see some loops developing. So the first thing that could promote gastroparesis is inflammation. And this is inflammation for any reason. So that could be injury, that could be infection, that could be autoimmunity. All right. Another potential cause of the inflammation may be head injury. So if you have a concussion or some sort of head injury, a head injury decreases cortex firing, which decreases vagal motor outflow, and the vagus nerve is a big time player in mediating gut inflammation and promoting the downward peristalsis and activating the migrating motor complex in the stomach. So gastroparesis may be caused by poor vagal motor outflow stemming from a head injury or stemming from some sort of inflammation that you've had. And so this would qualify under the brain-gut axis. So a brain-gut axis driver of your gastroparesis. Okay, now another huge driver of gastroparesis or of decreased migrating motor complex is insulin. So insulin spikes. So if you are insulin resistant, that may be driving your gastroparesis. Also, maybe you're not insulin resistant. Maybe you're hangry. Maybe you're hypoglycemic. Well, if you're that type of person, you're snacking a lot, you're eating a lot, which is spiking your insulin, which may be promoting decreased MMC function and your gastroparesis. So just eating in general decreases migrating motor complex function. And if you're insulin resistant, you're driving it downward even more. Now, to piggyback on that, like we said, eating itself will decrease MMC and exacerbate gastroparesis. Now, what you eat matters. Studies have shown that total caloric load matters, and the higher calories you eat, or the more calories you eat, the more you're inhibiting the MMC, so more that you're contributing to gastroparesis. And then the makeup of your food matters. And what studies have found is that fats inhibit the MMC more than sugars, and sugars inhibit the MMC more than protein. So of the three, fats inhibit the MMC or promote gastroparesis the most. Protein promotes it the least. So peanut oil specifically is the food that's been found to be the strongest inhibitor of the MMC. So if you're a person with gastroparesis and you're trying to heal and you're trying to decrease symptoms and get better, you want to investigate the foods you're eating and look for peanut oil, and if it's there, you don't want to be consuming those foods. And then lastly, dysbiosis can promote the MMC being inefficient. So you said, what? You said dysbiosis was an effect. Well, yes, it's also a promoter. So we have loops between dysbiosis causing and being in effect. And then food GI inflammation is one of our inflammatory drivers. So there's a couple loops there. Now, what we want to do is figure out our causes and then address them. So what are some strategies you could take to address your gastroparesis or to improve your migrating motor complex? Well, the answers are right here in front of us. A, we want to have optimal insulin sensitivity, and we want to be separating our times of eating from our times of fasting. We want to have fasting periods and fed periods, because the MMC is different from the fed state and the peristalsis associated with a fed state. So we want to be fed, obviously, but then we also want to fast. And that will lead to optimization of our insulin physiology. Now, when we're eating, we want to make sure we're not overeating in terms of calories and macros. We want to promote eubiosis, or a healthy balance between bacteria in our gut. Studies have shown that symbiotics, which are combinations of prebiotics and probiotics, promote a healthier migrating motor complex by promoting a healthier microbiome, which is obviously keeping pathogens at bay, decreasing GI inflammation. And then also, we want to decrease inflammation of all sources and causes, and we want to improve our vagal motor outflow. So if we've had a head injury, we've had a concussion, we need to rehab appropriately from that. And just passing the eye test doesn't mean that you've recovered from your concussion. That just means you can go back and play, but even that's questionable. So what you want to do is work with a practitioner that understands concussion, understands the metabolic impact of concussion, can evaluate your system and make sure that you've really healed from that head injury, and help you promote optimal vagus nerve function so you can stimulate that migrating motor complex that should start in the stomach and then move down the entire GI tract. So if you are suffering from gastroparesis or migrating motor complex issues, you have any of these symptoms, then you should seek out a functional medicine practitioner, partner with them, have the specific and individual workup done on yourself and the specific and individual recommendations created for you so that you can reach a life at optimal.